So your main type, and really what defines your main type, uh, when you take a test or when you do an Enneagram typing interview, is they really want to get at what your childhood wounds were, what your core fears are, the things that make you close up versus open up. The things that you've used and you've used rightly to protect yourself, because we all have to create ways to protect ourselves as children. Some have better childhoods than others, some have really rough ones. But regardless, even if you grow up in the best family with the best parents and the best situation financially, you're still living with other people. And those people have their core fears and their core wounds. And as you grow up, you learn that you have to manage yourself to get by. And these are the things that you use to manage yourself to get by.
Welcome back to Spiritual Context for Worldly Chaos. This next episode is with Hanna McElroy, who is both a tarot reader and an Enneagram reader. The Enneagram is a personality test, similar to something like Myers-Briggs, but the Enneagram has roots in ancient Egypt. So these concepts have echoed for a really long time. But before we begin the conversation, I just want to remind everybody that if you'd like to receive a message every week about what's coming up in the sky astrologically, subscribe to my Substack to receive This Week in the Sky. I let you know about upcoming transits, retrogrades, new and full moons, eclipses, and I also offer a little tarot reading for each zodiac sign. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, feel free to subscribe to it. Jessica and I have been really enjoying creating this, and we're really hoping that you're enjoying it too. So without further ado, this is 2023 me introducing Hanna McElroy. Today, we're focusing on an ancient personality map called the Enneagram. My guest Hanna explains the system to us, and we go over the 9 personality types, so listen carefully to find out which type you could be. Hanna McElroy is a native New Yorker who has lived in Seattle, Washington for over 30 years. She and her husband have owned 2 used bookstores, Magus and Magus Annex, in the city for over 20 years. Hanna began reading tarot as a young teen in Manhattan, providing readings from the apartment she shared with her mother. About 10 years ago, the subject of the Enneagram piqued her interest, and she began her studies primarily from the teaching perspective of Beatrice Chestnut. When she relaunched her formal tarot business a couple of years ago, she became fascinated with the intersections of tarot and Enneagram and decided to focus her practice in this way. Hanna offers Enneagram typing interviews, tarot readings from an Enneagram viewpoint, workshops on a variety of topics, and writes a widely read weekly Substack newsletter, Explorations on the Tarot Journey. Hello, Hanna. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So you are an Enneagram and a tarot reader, and we talk a lot about tarot on this podcast. My first question is, why the Enneagram out of, say, Myers-Briggs or human design?
Well, I think that all 3 of those modalities have value. Enneagram just really spoke to me because it is a system of consciousness raising. It's a psychological system. There's a magical aspect to it that you're definitely not getting from a Myers-Briggs analysis. I don't actually know too much about the human design, but it spoke to me, and it seemed to me that it really was a way to understand, more than anything, how we were affected as children and how that made us who we are and gave us our struggles and made things challenging, and how we address those challenges, and sort of in sort of a spiritual personality development that then as we got older, whether we dealt with our issues or didn't deal with our issues, sort of addressed how far along we could come in terms of like Enneagram development, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So what drew you specifically? Is there something about your childhood that it helped, or was there a moment that somebody introduced it to you and then you just sort of latched on?
Yeah, so it must have been about 10 years ago that I had a friend who was really interested in Enneagram. And I'm a student and a learner, and I own a couple of bookstores, and I'm always just looking for, new material, new reading. And I just kind of latched onto it, and I realized that there was a ton to it. And not unlike tarot, there are different schools of thought. I really was interested in understanding what kind of core fears I had and figuring out what type I was. And ironically, I saw myself as a type 3 for a number of years. And a type 3 is called the achiever, somebody who's extremely interested in how they're perceived by others and their success is perceived by others. And ultimately, though it didn't feel like perfectly right, and I had a typing interview with the guys who run, God, what is the name of their I think that they're called the Enneagram pathways. And anyway, I talked to this guy, and he actually was an Enneagram 8. And he, after talking to me, was like, you are absolutely an 8. And 8s and 3s are similar. They are similar, except 8s just don't get as much of their validation from the outside. Their validation comes more from inside. And what I also realized through going through that was that my dad is definitely a 3. I come from a family of artists in New York. My dad is a novelist. My mother was an artist. And there was everything in our house was to do with achievement and outside recognition, and who you are is your last best review. And so as a kid coming up, that was how I got, my pats on the back was from bringing home straight A's or creating this or creating that. And so what I realized was that really it was my dad who was the 3, but ultimately all the things that I dealt with growing up, being extremely strong, and as a female being really strong, being a leader, wanting to protect, safety being a real big issue, growing up in New York City in the 80s, not being really disciplined very much. And in fact, I did whatever I wanted to. There was definitely that sort of like need to keep myself safe in the streets kind of thing. And so anyway, it's like the evolution of me figuring out what my own type was. And then I led a class with a bunch of people, and we all worked on their types. And then I taught a class, and then I just joined different societies. And then I realized that, wow, it's like understanding someone's type from an Enneagram perspective can give such a great insight into a tarot reading. And what I also realized, it's like nobody else was really doing that. Not to say that in astrology readings and tarot readings, Enneagram doesn't come up. But for me, especially when I first meet with somebody, if they know their Enneagram type, that's amazing because that just gives me a clue in. And when I was first thinking about it, I was like, well, is that kind of cheating? And it's like, no, that's not cheating at all. It's just information as a basis to get started. And then just the modalities work together so well. And it's so interesting from a psychological perspective, but because I also look at Enneagram as a spiritual practice, because we really do have all the types in us, and we aren't just one type, it's all the types. It's just a really great tool to work together.
I love that. I think that's so great that you saw what your dad was and probably why you thought you were that way. And then you found out that you're an 8, but like you could see why you thought you were a 3. And I don't think that's cheating at all. I think one of the things that we talk about on this show a lot is that tarot is a great modality on its own, but it's such a wonderful complement when you find other things that kind of fill in so much more of the gap, where I think tarot can be, like a lot of beautiful artistic paintings that you look at and get all sorts of intuition and guides and impressions from it. But when you add it to something else, it almost like makes it flower, I think. And not that you have to do that, but if there is something else you really like, tarot could be something that you can either combine or just use on the side. So I think I'm really glad you said that, because I think a lot of people think that it's cheating, or that there's some kind of, rule, instilled in tarot that now it's like, well, now I'm not working because you put me with the Enneagram. So I think that's really great. You mentioned it a little bit, but the Enneagram is way older than I realized. right? Like how it's a pretty old system, right? I'm not saying ancient, but it's been around for quite a while, right?
Oh, it's back with the Egyptians. I'm not a Enneagram historical expert by any means, but the first time that we see the Enneagram symbol is in ancient Egypt. And then it was brought forth with, I don't know if you're familiar with Gurdjieff and the spiritualists, Blavatsky, and some of them, they went to Egypt, they brought it back, and that was in the 1800s in England. And so it's sort of interesting because at the same time that a lot of stuff is happening with tarot in the 1800s and early 1900s, there's all this stuff happening with the Enneagram and sort of a system of development. And what's also interesting about the Enneagram is that there are definitely schools of thought. So we had Gurdjieff and Blavatsky. We also had Claudio Naranjo, who's a little bit later on. And we have the narrative tradition. There are a lot of different traditions and a lot of different schools within the Enneagram. I have looked at all of them, and the one that makes the most sense to me is the stuff that Beatrice Chestnut and Uranio Pais have been working on. And it is psychological, but it is also extremely spiritual. Beatrice Chestnut was and is a psychotherapist. She was at Stanford, and Uranio Pais is this sort of wild spiritual teacher, and they have this bizarre partnership that just works beautifully. But he works very much kind of hearkening back to the original spiritual ideas, going all the way back to Egypt, and then Beatrice is very much sort of like current, modern, and they work together really well. So yeah, so it's got a really long history, and actually a longer history than the tarot.
You're exactly right. I was literally about to say, wow, they found something from Egypt where all tarot occultists wanted to find a tarot deck in Egypt. And they were like, well, we found this Enneagram thing. And like, then that blew up. And yeah, you're right. Tarot wanted that same flag from Egypt. But no, it did not come out of Egypt. It was a card game that then, moved into something occult. And it works wonderfully. It's just we don't need it to have such a mystical origin for it to not, for it to work wonderfully. So let's go over the Enneagram types really quick, because they all sound like archetypes to me. So the perfectionist, the giver, the achiever, the individualist, the investigator, the skeptic, the enthusiast, the challenger, and the peacemaker, right? 9 Enneagram personalities. So is that kind of like looking at things sort of archetypally similar to the major arcana?
Yes, absolutely. And there are those people who have assigned a major arcana to an Enneagram type. I don't know how on board I am with that, but there is stuff out there that says, the Emperor is, I think the Emperor is a 3, and the Magician is a 1. But I don't know if that makes sense. In some ways it makes me feel like, when you try to like make systems work together as like puzzle pieces in a perfect way. And I tend to look at things, I think more creatively and intuitively, and I don't need to put a type into a box. But at the same time, from an archetypal perspective, and certainly from a Jungian perspective, and from, if we think about Joseph Campbell and mythology, yes, the types are definitely archetypes. And, for example, type 1 is the perfectionist. I'm married to a 1, and, they really are constantly striving for perfection, which is not attainable. And at the same time, they're the people that you want, with you, because they do the detail work and they really make sure everything is as good as it's going to be. I always say in my house, it's like, I'm fine with an A-. A- is great, but I get a lot of shit done. Mm-hmm. And my husband, on the other hand, for him, it's like he'd rather work on one small project and have it be absolutely perfect. And if it takes him 5 years, so be it. So that's a great, like, that's what 1s are like.
I haven't taken the test, but I've had a lot of people around me who love the Enneagram, and I've listened to a lot of it. So I was like, I think I'm a 5. I think I'm the investigator, because that's all I will and research something until I don't even know what I'm researching anymore. And something they said about 5 investigators is that it's the research is so that the thing doesn't destroy me. And if that didn't like knock me back maybe my mom is also a 5. I might have the same kind of experience where I might be a different number, but I was exposed to a 5 growing up. But that's who she is. She will, everything is a heightened issue, and she needs to understand how it works so that it doesn't harm everybody, or so it doesn't harm herself, or so there's some sort of like anxiety kind of feeling with it. I don't know if that's kind of the archetype of the investigator, but
Yeah, I mean, the investigator has so many wonderful things about it, but where it can fall down, people who are 5s can't make a decision before they have all the information. And so,
oh my God, that's me.
and the thing is, you're never going to have all the information. And so sometimes it can be a roadblock, and it can be a roadblock to moving forward, because there's that sense that if you just get that final article read, or that final whatever it is, that then you'll have the information you need and everything will be fine. And, we all know that that's not real. It's not right. So, but these are, we talk about our shortcomings with the Enneagram. As an 8, I can steamroll people. I know what everybody should be doing. We need to move forward. We need to move forward quickly. And if we make a mistake, so what? It's all right. We're going. And yes, obviously you can see what a problem that can be for an 8, because number 1, not everybody wants to be steamrolled. And number 2, sometimes these mistakes could be bigger than, you might like. So, the 5, though, what the 5 has to offer is so much deep research and understanding, and really deep thinking. I mean, the 5 is the really deep intellectual thinker, and doesn't mind spending the time to really understand something. And so that, when I think of the 5s in my life, I mean, those are beautiful things. And it's like, the whole idea is that, we all have shortcomings, and then we all have virtues. And the idea is that, we embrace and we elevate our virtues, and we face our passions or our shortcomings like head on. We say, yeah, this is me. But the only way you can ever move past something is by facing it. So, so all the types, there are no good types, there are no bad types. All the types are, full and rich and human. And, if you look at all 9 types, it's sort of like that is humanity, at least in my mind.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and you'll be hearing the next segment tomorrow. If you're enjoying this podcast, feel free to subscribe from whatever podcast platform you like the best, or subscribe to my Substack. That's where I post the episodes, and I will be putting more information in those blogs as opposed to the descriptions that you find on your podcast platform. So if you want to know more about the person, or you want to get more involved with my communication and what I put out there, use the description box below to navigate to my Substack. Until tomorrow, blessed be.